But all this, of course, is leading to the emergence of a whole new world. So the big question is, as we enter this new world, will we enter it peacefully, or will there be resistance? And this is essentially the dilemma that the West faces. Because the West has been dominating world history for 200 years. And the history of the world teaches us that no great powers ever seek power easily. And my fear is that if we are going to have problems in the world, it's going to be because of a resistance by the West to accepting this change. And you see all kinds of indicators of this. I mean, the most obvious example I give is the one of, if you look at the leadership of the two most powerful economic institutions in the world, IMF and the World Bank. Even today, you have a rule that says that to become the head of the IMF, you must be European. To become the head of the World Bank, you must be an American. And 3.5 billion Asians, with the fastest growing economies in the world, with the largest pool of foreign reserves, and the largest pool of economics PhDs, cannot qualify to run the IMF or the World Bank. And this rule was reaffirmed as recently as 2007, last year, when both the heads were changed and the rule wasn't changed. But that's just one indicator of resistance to change. But the other problem that's emerging, and this is where I must confess that I have some parts of my book that are very painful for a Western reader. And the most painful part of the book, of course, is where I talk about a rather surprising phenomenon that is occurring today, which is that the Western countries, which for centuries used to be geopolitically competent, are for mysterious reasons now becoming geopolitically incompetent in their management of various global challenges. Now, I can of course give many examples, but in the book I give 4 concrete examples. The first and most obvious example of geopolitical incompetence is the way the West has treated the Islamic world. I mean, I don't understand why the West has decided to create so much anger in the Islamic world towards the West. I do not believe that there is a natural clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. And by the way, just so that you understand for the record, I am not a Muslim. I was born a Hindu. Indeed, my parents actually, as Hindus, had to flee from Pakistan because of the division of India and Pakistan. So I understand what prejudices against Muslims are like. But from that standpoint, I find it hard to understand how the West could have generated so much anger in the Islamic world. And the good news is that it's not a result of a clash of civilizations, it's a result of specific policies that have caused this anger in the Islamic world, whether it's the Middle East, in the Israel-Palestine issue, the inability to deliver a two-state solution, which, by the way, is in Israel's long-term interest also. This creates an enormous amount of anger. Then you had the war in Iraq, of course, which caused this anger, and now you see the failure in Afghanistan. The net result of all this is that there is a profound perception in the Islamic world that the West just doesn't care when Muslim lives are lost. And if that's the perception, it's a very dangerous perception to have. The second example of incompetence is, of course, if you look at the current round of trade discussions, at a time when more and more countries are beginning to believe that they want to have more free trade and they want to liberalize the global system, there is a failure of Western leadership to close the Doha round. Now, I am going in very quick summary form a very complex subject on which there can be lots of discussions, but fundamentally in the past, every trading round was completed because there was Western leadership to say, let's close the round. Today, that Western leadership is lacking. Third example of Western incompetence I point to is in the field of nuclear proliferation. And here, one of the saddest things we face in the world today is that we have a new non-proliferation treaty which is legally alive but spiritually dead. And is spiritually dead because the custodians of the non-proliferation treaty, the 5 nuclear powers, have not fulfilled their obligations under the NPT, which is to try and either reduce, eliminate, or certainly not modernize their nuclear arsenals. And the 5 nuclear powers are still modernizing their nuclear arsenals, and therefore violating a treaty which they expect others to respect. And the fourth example of incompetence I give, of course, is the biggest challenge we face now, which is global warming. And here the paradox is that the country that has educated the world the most about global warming is, of course, America, Al Gore and his famous movie, An Inconvenient Truth. And yet, the country that is most resistant to doing anything about global warming is the United States of America, because it is impossible to persuade the American taxpayer to pay even $1 a gallon of tax to reduce American consumption of gasoline. So these are just a few quick examples I give of Western incompetence, which makes it much harder to move into the New World Order. And I say this as someone who wishes that the West would become more competent rather than less competent in its management of global affairs and challenges. And if this incompetence continues, then we will have a very difficult time. But I promised you also a happy ending. So let me conclude with the happy ending, which is that despite all these problems and challenges, I still believe that we will end up with a happy conclusion in the world of tomorrow. And there are at least 2 reasons why I believe this to be the case. Firstly, the number of what you might call responsible stakeholders in global peace and prosperity is growing by leaps and bounds. And as you all know, once you join the middle class, once you have a home of your own, once you have property and belongings of your home, you want stability, you want order, you don't want suicide bombings. And guess what? Asia is producing hundreds of millions of people who are joining the middle class. And what they aspire to is to create a stable world order of precisely the kind that we all want together. And that's why I'm optimistic about the future. But the other piece of good news is that the march to modernity, which I document in my book, and how it began with Japan and went into the 4 Tigers, and from the 4 Tigers went to Southeast Asia, to China and to India. That march to modernity is now poised to enter the Islamic world, especially into West Asia. And if it does, and if indeed the Muslim countries decide that we too want to modernize, we too want to become like China and India, we too want to have rich and prosperous and stable middle classes, then when that march to modernity unleashed in Asia enters the Islamic world, I guarantee you that we will not be entering a dangerous world. And I hope that's good news for you. Thank you.